Welcome to Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health, alongside Mike Waters. I'm Brent Axe. Coming up, we'll hear from Syracuse head coach Jim Boeheim on a contrast of styles between Boston College and Northeastern, but both end up being wins for the Orange. And we'll take a look at Syracuse's next opponent, one of their last non-conference games of the season, as Buffalo comes to the Guerrier Dome on Saturday. But Mike, starting with something I just mentioned there with Coach Boeheim, boy, you couldn't write this any better. Going from 101 points, a record-setting 16 three-pointers against Boston College, to a Wednesday matinee against Northeastern where Syracuse hits 2 three-pointers and scores 62 points. But the results, both wins for Syracuse. So I guess they'll take them any way they can get them these days.
Yeah, you never turn down a win, but it wasn't pretty on Wednesday in the game against Northeastern. You mentioned the 3-point shooting, only 2 of 18. You know, Syracuse's top 2 scorers, Buddy Boeheim and Alan Griffin, both had horrible days. Buddy couldn't get anything to drop. He made his first shot and then missed everything after that. 11 straight misses for Buddy. Alan just seemed out of it. But, you know, they were able to gut out a win. And, you know, they did it with rebounding and defense and turning Northeastern over 21 times. Led to a lot of points that were hard to come by in the half-court set. So when you're able to get a steal and get out on the break, like Joe Girard did on several occasions, boy, you take those and you just hang on. And that's basically what they had to do against Northeastern.
Mike, it was interesting from the standpoint of the 3-point shots, a drastic drop-off there, a horrible offensive day for Syracuse, but they amp up their defense, as you mentioned. I was particularly struck by Jim Boeheim insisting after the game that the early start time, the quick turnaround had nothing to do with how they played on Wednesday. I mean, it hit it a little bit, right? Like, the only time you play at 3:00 in the afternoon on a weekday is if you're in Maui or something, or the ACC tournament or something of that nature. Quick turnaround. They'd have 2 practices beforehand, but that had to factor just a little bit, right? The odd start time.
Yeah, maybe a little. It's still such a weird atmosphere to play at home in front of absolutely no fans. You get absolutely no home court advantage. I think what might have had an even bigger effect, though, is the fact that you're still looking at a team that hasn't had a lot of practice time, especially Buddy Boeheim. You know, he had that long layoff while he was in, contact tracing protocol there. And, yeah, he came out and he played against BC, but I think, when he made those first 2 shots against B, it was sort of fool's gold because he didn't make a lot after that. Basically what he did is he jump-started everybody else on the team. He got Alan Griffin and Joe Girard going. We didn't see a whole lot of Buddy, making a ton of shots after just those first 2. So, then you roll into Northeastern and he's off still. He just was not in sync. Northeastern did a good job on him. We won't, let's give credit where credit is due. So, I think Buddy was showing the rust from the long layoff, just as we saw Joe Girard show rust early on. And, he shot it much better yesterday. So, we're hoping that this team can avoid any more COVID delays and pauses and start to get into more of a routine of game, practice, game, practice. They need some time just working on themselves, because Jim Boeheim keeps saying how great they looked up until the first COVID stoppage. And then ever since then, it's been sort of stop and start.
Mike, one thing we were enamored with, to move on here to Quincy Guerrier, who just continues to be Syracuse's most consistent player. He's been their best player this year, but we were a little enamored with the 3-point shooting early on. Well, Wednesday's game, and even the Boston College game as well, showed the force, the monster, the Hulk that Quincy can be inside. He has 3 double-doubles this season. He had 3 all of last year. And I'm struck by when he's asked about his play now. He's starting to talk about things like rebounding angles and things we didn't hear him talk about last year when he was just kind of learning the position. And Jim Boeheim was saying at his press conference after the Northeastern game that when they first found Quincy, he was a shooter and he was shooting everywhere. But are we now seeing kind of a process play out here and come to fruition of Quincy becoming an inside player, when it seemed like the player that Syracuse found and recruited was maybe more of an all-around guy?
Yeah, I think you're seeing 2 things. I think the one thing, as you mentioned, I think you're seeing Quincy Guerrier start to really embrace the role of the rebounder and not just linger around the 3-point line. When Jim Boeheim talked after the Northeastern game about how when they scouted Quincy, he really was a perimeter guy. He shot threes. He didn't get a ton of rebounds, although they liked his potential as a rebounder. And even last season when he would come in and do it, there were some times when he wouldn't, and he would still like want to move away from the basket, and he wanted to toy around on the perimeter. But yeah, he talked about all those angles for the ball and how he goes after these rebounds. And it reminded me of when Dennis Rodman in that 30 for 30 would talk about his approach to rebounding. When someone like that really adopts the willingness to want to work for rebounds and think the rebounding game through, man, you can become a huge threat. And that's what Quincy was doing on Wednesday against Northeastern with 16 rebounds, a career high. And if it hadn't been for that, I think Syracuse loses that game. The other half of the Quincy Guerrier process, though, is we have to remember he was playing with torn muscles in his core, his groin, all of last season. He had to have off-season surgery to repair them. We really have no idea how much that really affected him last year. You have to think that it did some, man. If you've ever played through any kind of torn or pulled muscle,
not pretty.
You know how hard it is. So I think we're also seeing what a healthy Quincy Guerrier looks like.
Mike, Joe Girard has been markedly better in these last 2 games for Syracuse. He kind of stepped in a pothole the first 4 games. He had 38 points. He's had 38 points in the last 2 games. And what I was struck by in the Northeastern game was he did that even with Buddy Boeheim struggling. We know how much those two feed off of each other and work off each other. So Buddy goes 1 of 12. Joe's got to carry the load. He does it. He scores 21 points. And the thing that Joe gets criticized for the most is defense. And I understand Northeastern is not some of the better teams. They're a good team. They gave Syracuse all they can handle, certainly, but this is not, an ACC team you're facing here. That being said, Joe had 6 steals in that game. So what has been the biggest improvement you've seen from Joe in the past 2 games?
I don't know if it's so much an improvement as he's kind of knocking the rust off. That I think he was probably the player most affected by the long layoff before the opener against Bryant. And then after the opener, he had to play 3 games in a row without his backcourt partner there. So that made it a little bit more difficult for him. And as Buddy has come back for these last 2 games, I don't think it's a surprise to see Joe play better. So, because he's kicking off the rust at the same time, he's getting his running mate back out there with him. So, that helps Joe out a lot. He didn't shoot the ball great last night against Northeastern. He was, 2 for 9 from 3-point range. What he did? He did something he doesn't always do. He drew fouls. Now, some of it was off of those steals that you mentioned. He got the steal. He was going down on the break, and he had a bigger guy chasing him down. And rather than just getting your shot blocked, he kind of lured those guys into fouling him. And he went to the line. He 9 of 9 from the free throw line. And we know he can shoot free throws. He's a great free throw shooter, but he didn't always shoot 9 in a game. So again, getting to the line is something else that saved Syracuse in that game against Northeastern.
Well, let's hear from Syracuse head coach Jim Boeheim and his thoughts on that win over Northeastern. It's time for Syracuse Soundbites.
I think the danger of the game with Boston College, everybody thinks that we're there. Boston College just had an unbelievably bad game. We made shots early, and then they just couldn't make anything. And that game has no relationship to reality. That's a game you just forget. It means nothing. And tonight we came out, we didn't get loose balls. We didn't get to loose balls. Allen was in a funk from the opening tip. I mean, he just tried to dribble into 2 guys early and just was never involved in the game. While he was on the court, we lost. I mean, he just wasn't in the game in any way, shape, or form. And he can't let his offensive problems dictate how he plays. There were 2 or 3 loose balls. He could have got to 2 or 3 defensive mistakes he made that you can't make. We're going to have some bad shooting games, and tonight is a perfect example. Buddy is not ready for that contact yet. He's just not back there. Against Boston College, he didn't shoot it very well, but he was wide open every time. Tonight, he didn't get any wide open shots except the one he missed coming off the end of the game, which was a great shot, and he missed it. But by running our offense, we got Marek rolling, and he got an easy tip in. We got some easy tries inside that, we're going to have to convert. Marek's just not quite ready to, go out there and get 25. And he could have done that tonight.
Mike, Buffalo has come to the Carrier Dome the past couple of years. I kind of like this series. I like that they come down the thruway and play. Buffalo beat Syracuse recently. Nate Oates, we know the little scuffle that he and Jim Boeheim and Mike Krzyzewski got into verbally recently. Used to be the coach there, now at Alabama. But it feels like no matter who is coaching or who's on that roster, Buffalo's going to come in. They're going to put up a fight. Do you think this Buffalo team can do that?
I think they can. I think what started with the culture that was built there by Bobby Hurley and then was handed down to Nate Oates has continued under Jim Whitesell. They play hard. They get after you on defense. They have an intensity about them. There's just kids that are going to scrap. And the biggest example of that is a kid from the Rochester area by Jonathan Williams. Now in his junior year, a kid that didn't play a whole heck of a lot his first 2 seasons, is averaging 20 points a game and about 8.5 rebounds. And he just plays hard. I think with him setting the tone, I think you're seeing a Buffalo team that's going to remind you of the Buffalo teams of recent years.
This is one of the last non-conference games on the slate for Syracuse. Georgetown is going to get wedged in there in the middle of January. But after Buffalo, it's going to be all ACC all the time. And knock on wood, Mike, things have been going for Syracuse since a couple of COVID pauses. They're always going to be, diligent and trying to avoid it and wear the wristbands and all the protocols and everything. But we just know how prevalent this is out there. So a pause in the near future wouldn't be a surprise for the Orange, certainly. But all that aside, normal is not a word we use in 2020, even going into 2021. But do you feel like Syracuse is in the best kind of rhythm they can be given the circumstances? Practice, game, practice, game, a little bit of a holiday break, but it feels like things are settling in as best as can be in a weird year.
Yeah, probably as best as can be. Because, it's funny. I really don't think they've hit their stride yet. I don't think they have found a real rhythm, but I wouldn't expect them to. So yeah, given the whole, the way everything has gone here early in the season and even before the season, I think they probably are in a pretty good spot at 5-1 with the only loss on the road against a top 25 team in Rutgers. If they can get, a win on Saturday against Buffalo, you've navigated the majority of your non-conference schedule. And then you got to just move on. It does feel in a way like it's the last non-conference game because Georgetown is such a familiar opponent. And also it's a game that got moved into January because of the reduced schedule. So it's just kind of like a game against a rival in the middle of an ACC schedule. So, they are where they're at, and they just got to get Buddy Boeheim back in the flow. Hopefully Alan Griffin's, bad, almost invisible game against Northeastern is just a blip on the screen. And guys like Quincy Guerrier, Marek Dolezaj, Joe Girard can just continue to play the way they have been over the last few games, and they'll be okay. And then at some point, you got to get Barama Sidibe back. And then once you get him back, you're not only whole again, but you're also a little bit deeper.
Well, Mike and I are going to take a little bit of a holiday break over the next couple of weeks here. So even though Mike and I disagree on this, in the spirit of the holidays, Mike, show us the shirt. Let's give everybody a Christmas message here.
Happy holidays, everybody, from everybody at Nakatomi Plaza.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Whether or not you believe Die Hard is a Christmas movie, we'd like to wish everybody out there happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2021. For now, for Mike Waters, I'm Brent Axe. That's Orange Weekly presented by Krause Health. We'll see you next time.